Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. How are we doing? How is everybody? I feel like it's been so long since I've done one of these. I know it's been a couple days. Maybe you don't know that it's been a couple days, but I know it's been a couple days. Wasn't feeling real well, so I had to skip a few days. I was just wasn't feeling real well, so I was finding it hard to. I started this video and I was not doing well, so I had to put it off for a day or so, and my body decided that I needed to take a little rest. So here we are. We are back, and we are gonna try again. But we are on day 6 of the Chandler Halderson trial, and we are gonna, hopefully you guys have been keeping up and you are up to speed on all of the things, because quite honestly, I have forgotten some of the things. So hopefully this will catch me back up to speed. But I do know that he has been charged with the murder of his mom and dad. He has been charged with dismembering said mom and dad. He is on trial for those things. We are in Wisconsin, so there is no death penalty in this case. If anybody watched the Darrell Brooks fiasco that took place yesterday, because as I am doing this video right now, it is November 17th of 2022. His sentencing was yesterday, 11/16, November 16th of 2022, and it was a ridiculously long sentencing. And I am going to, when I have a moment, I'm going to sit down, and since I did watch that, I do have some thoughts on it myself. Since mental health was brought up in his statements and his mom's statements, I want to give some thoughts on that, but that'll be in a different video, focused on that a little bit. Just when I have some time, I'll probably do that tomorrow or this weekend, depending on what I got going. So that is what I plan to do with that. But for now, we're going to go ahead and get started with day 6 on this one. And hopefully we get into something exciting and we can figure some stuff out here. So let's go ahead and add that, and we press play. Oh, and I also just wanted to remind everybody that I am not an expert or I don't have a law degree in anything. I'm not an expert in anything. I just wanted to do these videos to share my thoughts and my ideas, or my, just kind of my general take on things. I talk to myself anyway, so I just thought I'd record it during stuff like this. I don't know if anybody else, talks to their TV when they're watching things, but this is what I do. So just figured maybe somebody else would have some of the same ideas or the same thoughts that they might want to share, and might be interesting. So here we are. But yeah, so Here we go. Let's get going. Let's go. It's very quiet. No.
Good morning, sir.
Good
morning.
If you are able to safely and responsibly testify without a mask, that would be our preference if you could.
All right.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Good morning. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Stephen Greiber, Steven Greiber, as in boy, ER.
And what do you do for a living, sir?
I'm retired,
What are you retired from?
law enforcement.
In what capacity were you in law enforcement?
I was an investigator or detective for most of my years. I'll say that I was a law enforcement officer.
In full transparency, at times you and I have worked together in our careers.
Yes,
Where at?
at the Dane County District Attorney's Office,
And how long were you at the district attorney's office?
12 years.
Fair to say, since you retired, unfortunately, we haven't kept in contact or anything, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Where do you live, sir, in relation to Bart and Krista Halderson?
I live directly across the street. If our houses are almost like a mirror image of each other, going out my driveway, across the street, or go into their driveway. So our garages face each other, and the front of our houses face each other.
In the early part to the mid part of July of last year, was there some significant police presence in your neighborhood?
Yes,
Was that for an ongoing period of time?
yes.
At some point, did you talk to a police officer about something you perhaps noticed or remembered from July 1st of 2021?
Yes, I did.
Just first of all, if you could set the stage, what were you doing that day, July 1st?
Well, July 1st, initially, I had been up I have a garden that's away from my property. It's relatively large, a vegetable garden. So I'd been up there most of the day. And then later in the day, my granddaughter had a softball game. So I had attended that softball game, which was like around 6 o'clock in the evening.
What happened when you arrived home?
So when I came home, which probably been an hour later, about 7 o'clock-ish, somewhere in there. But I had previously harvested some radishes out of my garden and had them in a 5-gallon pail. So I had taken them out into my front driveway and
Objection, relevancy.
up, just cutting off the
Relevancy.
excess leaves and stuff like that. But I had sat in a park bench that I have sitting on my
Objection,
driveway,
relevant.
that's sitting between the 2 garage doors because I have a 3-bay garage door or garage.
About what time of the day were you out in your lawn or the driveway?
Objection.
It was probably about 7 o'clock-ish, somewhere around that time.
And what did you
Bolstering.
notice at that time that caught your attention?
What caught my attention was while I was there doing that for a period of time,
Dragging.
all of a sudden I could detect a strong odor just of burning
3-car
wood.
garage.
And so I thought someone maybe had a fireplace or
He's
just say a
rich.
fire pit or something outside going. They're just burning some firewood. But about 5 minutes or so later, all of a sudden that odor of burning wood became a distinct odor that was more like in the line of what I thought someone was like barbecuing a large pork, like in one of these large
With barbecuing, maybe.
barbecue pits or whatever that can hold a whole pork.
And how long did that smell persist in your neighborhood?
Well, for the remainder of the time I was outside, it was
Human
present, kind of became real strong, kind of like a pungent smell, to the point that I actually walked down my driveway half the distance and I looked up and down the street to see if anybody was doing anything like grilling or something else was going on, and I didn't see anything at that point.
If you had to guess, or if you had to estimate distance-wise from the location you are to the Halderson home, about how far away is it?
About maybe 100 to 130 feet.
And you have that observation that day. You're not here to say exactly what that smell was, right?
Other than it smelled to me like, something burning of meat.
He
or
was gonna say
fats
burning
or
flesh.
something.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
I think he was gonna say flush.
This witness be released and excused. Thank you so much, sir. Have a good remainder of your day.
State calls Colin Lynch. Please stand.
So what they were getting at is that he smelled the burning bodies. That's what he's insinuating
Good
with
morning.
that their
If you
testimony.
believe you can do so safely and responsibly, testifying without a mask is our preference. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Good morning, sir. Please state, spell your name correctly.
Colin Lynch. COLIN-LYNCH.
And Mr. Lynch, whereabouts do you live?
7022 Bridgman Road.
And what municipality?
Windsor?
Did you know someone named Bart Halderson?
Municipality.
Yes.
How did you know Bart Halderson?
Neighbor, and we're both commissioners on Lake District.
Sure. I'm gonna have you pull that microphone just a little bit closer to you. I'm sorry. Sometimes
He was trying to.
You say you're both commissioners on the Lake District?
Yes, it's a special tax district that acquires funds for the management of the pond that we live on.
Sure. You both back up to the pond?
Yeah, correct.
In relation to Mr. Halderson's house, were you aware of
Yes,
where
we do.
Bart
We
Halderson
saw
lived?
that.
Yes.
Where was your house?
It's on a different video.
Directly.
Did a tour of the house.
Oh.
Very nice.
So across the pond, you'd see Halderson's house.
Bart.
Back in July of 2021, did you have any security cameras at your house?
July 2021, yes.
What type of security system, or how many cameras did you have at your home?
A total of 13.
Did some
Holy
of them
shit.
face the front of your house?
Yes.
And did at least one of them
Cameras.
face the rear of your house?
It's a lot of cameras.
And does that camera look toward
Sorry.
the pond in some respects?
Yes, the pond is in the images in the above the ground. So.
What was the purpose of that camera when you installed it? Was it to look at the pond or was it to look at something else?
Oh, I had planned when I installed the cameras. I had planned on putting in a pool, and there's terribly risky, terrifying things. And so one of the many reasons for installing cameras at the pool in the rear was the primary purpose of that.
In the mid part of July of last year, did you make
Terrifying,
did police have
risky
any contact with you about your
things.
security cameras and perhaps them having some footage that they thought was helpful?
Yes.
And did you provide full access to your security system at that time?
Yes,
In fact, at one point, they actually took the DVR from your home, did they not?
that's correct.
Okay. And did you later learn that they were particularly interested in maybe the rear camera of your house facing across the pond for the Halderson house?
Roughly, yes.
And you fully comply with any testing they wanted to do during that time period?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked in this case is exhibit number 306. Let me just ask you, you know what that is?
Yes, that's my camera 6, my property.
Okay. And is that kind of a screenshot?
That would be accurate, yes.
I'll move 306 into evidence.
No objection.
It is received.
So I think you testified, the deputies took your DVR system and they pulled footage off of it, but you're saying that 306 is at least a screenshot of what that rear camera maybe would have been looking at around that time?
That's correct.
Okay, I'll just move to publish quickly, 306. And you said you were planning to build a pool. Looks like you followed through with that, right?
Amazingly, yes.
Okay.
Amazingly, yes.
You had no further part in analyzing the video or doing anything like that. That was the sheriff's deputies, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And did they return your DVR to you eventually?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
No, thank you.
May this witness be excused and released?
He may.
Thank you so much, sir. Have a good remainder of your day. Thank you.
It sounds like the next witness is just on a different floor, so he's on his way up.
All right,
But
thank
we'll
you.
just, I'll sit here as silently for a minute.
Very good.
Sit here
Actually,
silently.
it's a good point for me to let the jury know that I have a matter on my calendar at 11:45 that I have to address. Although I can be a little bit later, a little bit early. It depends upon where we are in our process. But I'm hoping that the witness schedule will work out in that regard. Otherwise, I may have to cut things off depending on how late we run. Thank you.
The state calls Scott Coons at this time.
You solemnly swear affirm the testimony you're about to give
Found a sucker.
Good morning, sir. If you're able to safely and responsibly testify without a mask and are comfortable doing so, please do.
I will, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
Name for the record.
Good morning. My name is Scott Kuntz, spelled K-U-N-T-Z.
And what do you do for a living, sir?
I'm a sheriff's deputy with the Dane County Sheriff's Office in Madison.
Any particular area?
Yeah, I work in our support services division. And in the support services division, I have a number of duties assigned to me. I conduct covert surveillance when we are looking for criminal suspects and their activities. I collect video evidence, audio evidence, image evidence. I participate in search warrants, not only of physical locations, but of devices looking for information. and I perform forensic image, audio, and video analysis.
Highlighting specifically forensic image and audio analysis, what specific training do you have in that field of study?
So in forensic video analysis, specifically, I've got over 1,400
We're not doing
hours
this.
of education and continuing education over the
We
course of
shall
my career.
not.
And I had also noticed that while I was out of town, just checking news headlines online. So I knew when I came back to work, improve height, and that can be done in many instances with video. Reconstruction and recreation of events. I've done that a number of times in my career where we will try to recreate events. Today I'll talk a bit about some recreation through a process called reverse projection, where recently I worked a case where the question was, where was this camera when it took this video? And so it was an hours-long process of trying to locate in three-dimensional space where that camera was when it took the images that were involved in that investigation.
And you're wearing a badge, so I'll ask you, in addition to all of that, are you also a sworn law enforcement officer?
Yes, I've been a sheriff's deputy for 28 years.
Showing you what's been marked in this case is exhibit number 307. Can you tell us what that is?
This is my curriculum vitae.
And approximately how many pages is this?
I don't know, 25 pages.
And is that a summary of your training experience and perhaps some of your education as well?
That's
I'll
excessive.
move 307 into evidence.
No objection.
It is received.
I think my resume is probably 3
In this
pages.
specific case, at some point were you asked to become involved regarding a video of some homeowner named Colin Lynch who lived on Bridgman Road, perhaps behind the Halderson residence, who had a video facing the rear of his property?
I was.
And did you talk to Mr. Lynch?
I did several times.
And initially, were you able to obtain that video from him?
I was.
How so?
Initially, a copy of the video was provided me by Dane County Deputy Sheriff Michael Wilk. And as I was looking at the video, trying to assess what we had, what we didn't have, what the limitations were with the evidence that we had received, one of the questions that I often ask, especially in very serious cases such as this one, is do we have the purest form, the best evidence possible from that recorder, that DVR, called a digital video recorder. And so initially I worked with the copy that had been given to me. And then eventually I was able to get a video in a couple different formats from that DVR, and I could make an assessment in the laboratory if I had the purest form of what was there.
And we're going to look at your reports, and I know there's a PowerPoint, and we're going to see some video here in a second. But before we do that, I want to ask you, at the time you were performing this work, were you involved in other aspects of the investigation into the deaths of Bart Crystal Halderson?
Yes, I was.
And just to summarize for the jury so they know maybe what was in your mind while performing some of this work, what you knew around the time that you started performing this work about the investigation.
When the events unfolded at the Halderson residence, I was out of town on personal business. And I believe it was on July 9th, I was contacted by my supervisor. He was then a lieutenant. His name was Matthew Carls, K-A-R-L-S. And he informed me that the Haldersons had disappeared initially and that it was turning into a homicide investigation. And I had also noticed that while I was out of town, just checking news headlines online. So I knew when I came back to work that we were going to be in what we call major case mode, where all resources are devoted to the investigation of the crimes. So I knew that body parts had been found prior to my involvement with the case. And if I remember correctly, an arrest had been made just prior to me getting involved in the case as well. I was shown a couple of photographs of the inside of the Halderson residence. I was informed that it appeared to have been a fire in and around the fireplace in the lower level of the family room at the house. And I was informed that no bodies were found. Typically in our homicides, we find bodies right there. And in this case, that wasn't the situation.
And you produced a report in this case, did you not?
I did.
It's a somewhat extensive report, but I'll provide it to you. I've marked in this case exhibit number 313. Could you absolutely take a drink of water and then take a look at that and let me know, is that your report that you've produced in this case?
Why does he always tell him to take a drink of water? It's weird.
Yes, this is my report.
Approximately how many pages is that?
When printed, this report is 36 pages.
And does that summarize your findings in this investigation?
Yes, it does.
I'll move 313 into evidence.
No objection.
It is received.
And I'll show you 308. What does that appear to be?
This is a thumb drive, and it's labeled Kuhn's Light Analysis PowerPoint.
And you produced the PowerPoint in this case to display to the jury, perhaps, what's in your report in a more easy to understand fashion.
Yes, I did.
I'll move 308 into evidence.
No objection.
It is received.
I'll move to publish.
You may.
So as we're queuing this up, I have a couple questions for you. What was the question you were trying to answer in this report? What was the question at hand?
When I initially got briefed on this case upon my return to Madison, I made contact with Deputy Sheriff Mike Wilk. He had been assigned to look at the video from 7022 Bridgman Road, Mr. Lynch's DVR video, and to catalog the series of events chronologically that he observed in the video. I've trained Mike Wilk in the past at Madison College, so I'm familiar with him and his work. And I said, Mike, let's meet. I just want you to show me what you see, what you don't see, and what your observations are. And he indicated to me that on the video, there was a flickering light that he believed was coming from the Halderson residence on the early morning hours of July 2nd, 2021. And I said, what do you believe that light to be? He said, I think it's a fire in that family room at the house. And I asked him why he believed that. And he said things that made sense to me. It's a flickering light. He had knowledge. He told me that there was a fireplace in that room. And I had not yet at that point been in the house. And I said, well, how do you know it's coming from that window? He said, well, I've looked at daytime video, and I think that's where it is. So I looked at that video, and not being familiar at that point with the residents, I thought he's probably right, but really it's a perception thing. We perceived it probably was that window. So the question I posed to him and to Detective Shunk and Sims is, I think we have an opportunity here with this video to not only perceive what we think was the source of that light, but to prove it. And so the question really was, where was that light coming from? Not what the source of the light was, but where in the Halderson residence was that coming from?
And so you talked a little
Did
bit
you
about
recreate
forensic
it?
video analysis, and you have a slide here. It says the scientific examination, comparison, and or evaluation of video in legal matters. That's perhaps a technical definition, but what's a layman's definition of what this is, what we're about to do?
Sure. So on slide 2 here, I've got the textbook definition of forensic video analysis, but the idea is that regardless of whether it's a liquor theft or a homicide, as an analyst, I should be clinically looking at the data, trying to understand what it can prove, what it cannot prove, what its limitations are, and how firm of a foundation do we have on the data that we're relying upon. If you don't have a forensic video analyst involved between the viewing of the video and the interpretation of the video, the interpretation could be skewed. I use the example sometimes of looking at WebMD. I may not feel well, and I could look at WebMD, and I could diagnose myself with all sorts of things. I might be right, I might be wrong, but I'm not qualified to say. The idea with forensic video analysis is that anybody can look at video, and sometimes we're right in what we perceive from those recordings, but a forensic video analyst is trained to set aside feelings and things that might be
WebMD makes me a
contextually
doctor.
bias-based, and objectively look at the data and see what it might prove.
How dare you tell me otherwise?
Why can't I just go on my computer and just zoom in with my fingers and just make an educated guess? What do you add to the mix?
So what a forensic video analyst does is tries to make sure that if science can be applied appropriately, and if it is the right thing to do in terms of can we answer a question, if there's a testable question, something we can quantify,
Sounds like
height,
Kermit the Frog.
speed, identification, in this case, identification. We should try to do that in a valid, repeatable, reproducible manner. So the idea there is that, can I do experiments over and over again and get the same or similar result? Also, can I hand off the data and my report to a like-trained analyst, and could they, without any knowledge of the case, work the data and get the same or similar result if their training and experience and tools are comparable?
Is it your belief and your testimony that your work in this case and in other cases where you perform forensic video analysis can be replicated by other similarly trained people?
Absolutely.
And they, for all intents and purposes, should, if the work is done correctly or in the same way, would probably find exactly the same result.
They will get the same result.
The north side of the Halderson residence was, in fact, the area that you were concerned with, correct?
That is correct.
Here's a photograph. This photograph appears to be taken on July 22nd, 2021. Just a couple of questions. In this photograph, are we looking at essentially the backyard, looking at the Halderson house?
That's correct. I took this photograph in the backyard at the Halderson residence.
And at your back, when you took this photograph, was that the pond?
Yes.
The windows are blacked out. Could you just, did law enforcement place that there, or was that like that when you had to see?
I was at the scene a number of times, in the house, around the house, on a number of different occasions. And on July 22nd, when I was there, I spoke with Deputy Sheriff Greg Leatherberry. We worked hand in hand on crime scenes for many years. And he said, by the way, he said the lower level windows in this tri-level house have a black canvas or covering over the windows. And he just wanted to make sure I was aware of that. He asked me if I needed to take those down for any reason. I said, no. If we want privacy, we have to create it. And so in homicide investigations in particular, we try to cover up out of sensitivity to the victims and in trying to keep the investigation pure and keep prying eyes from looking into areas that they need not look. The two windows on the lower level in the center were covered, as well as the window on the right, which was the north garage window.
Law enforcement placed that.
Law enforcement placed that on there.
Here you add some labels. What are we looking at there?
Yes, so to try to do the analysis of where the light source is coming from on the early morning hours of July 2nd, I just put annotations on this image to help familiarize people with what the windows represented. So the window on the far left is what I labeled dining room window number 1. It is in the dining room. The next one to the right is kitchen window number 2. That's the window above the kitchen sink. Kitchen door number 3 had a window in it. It was a walk-through door that went from near the pantry in the kitchen out onto a deck area. Fireplace window number 4, again, my terminology was the window closest to the fireplace in the lower level of the home. Number 5, family room door. That was a walk-through door in that same family room. To the right, TV window number 6. That was a window closest to a television, a flat screen TV that was mounted on the wall, the west wall of that family room. And then finally, garage north window number 7. That was a small window that was on the north side of the garage.
And we're going to continue to use these labels as we go through your presentation, correct?
That's correct.
What is this?
So slide number 6 that you're looking at is from Google Maps. I've got the hyperlink there on the image. Part of my job involves certified drone operations, and typically in a case such as this, I would fly a drone and we would take pictures from the air to try to demonstrate from a bird's eye view what we have there. This location is not far from the Dane County Regional Airport, so there are some restrictions in flying a drone, as well as we have a limit on how high we can fly drones. So in this case, it was more advantageous to use Google Maps. The reason I put this image in this presentation is to try to orient people to where the camera was at Colin Lynch's house at 7022 Bridgman Road versus the Halderson residence. So on the lower right, I've indicated camera location at 7022 Bridgman Road. The camera was located on the underside of a decking structure. So like the patio, the Lynch home had a patio area where you could walk through some doors and out into the pool area. And just above the door was the deck for the upper level deck. The camera was mounted just below that deck. And that was pointed towards the direction of the Halderson residence. And in the upper left-hand corner of this image, I've labeled Halderson residence. You can see the roof there in that image. And then with yellow annotations, I have indicated the approximate field of view of that camera.
What are we looking at here?
So slide number 8, I put some sample images for a better understanding of what the field of view was from the CCTV or closed circuit television system there. The image on the left is from the daytime on July 2nd. It has no particular significance other than that is just the field of view. You can see the pool area of Mr. Lynch's residence. Further into the scene behind the pool is his backyard. It's grass. Beyond that is the pond. And then way off in the distance, where I have a red line kind of pointing toward the top of that image, is where the Halderson residence is located. That same view at nighttime, indicated on the right side of the screen, is from the early morning hours of July 2nd, 2021. And it's the same scene, just at night.
You've mentioned a couple of times, we're talking about a several hour period. So very early, when we say early morning hours, just the first leading into the second, but those early morning hours of July 2nd, for a several hour period, there was a flickering light that you were concerned with, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what is this right here?
Excuse me. In slide number 9, a flickering light was recorded on CCTV for several hours at the Halderson residence. This image is enlarged to try to show where on that image you could see, if you watched, where that light was coming from. So I've got a red line here pointing to where that flickering light was located on the Halderson property.
Slide 10, what are we looking at there?
So slide number 10, this is a small video sample of that flickering light enlarged 2 times. And I think it's like a 10-second video. If you hover, you can play it. And it's just a short little clip. If you look carefully where that red line is pointing when the video plays, there is a flickering light in that location.
And we'll look at a good deal of video here in a moment. The unknown is right, and I think we already talked about this. The question you're trying to answer, the unknown, is which window was associated with that flickering light for that several hour period in those early morning hours of the second.
That's correct.
You had to answer some questions to solve this question, I would imagine. First being, how was the video file constructed that you had?
Yes, much like when you go to the doctor, they make a visual assessment of you. They listen to you and your symptoms and your explanation of what your issues are. They may do some medical tests, take your pulse, check your respirations, different things, trying to figure out, what is the cause or what is going on. The same thing is true in forensic video analysis.
Mess with this
It is not
camera for a
proper
minute.
to just start diving in and looking at video, but
So it
rather
stops
interrogating
flickering.
or trying to examine the characteristics of the
I'll be right back.
files that you received, because it's that training experience of how those files are constructed, which inform your decisions about what we can say about the video and what we can't say. It shows us our limitations, and it's important to know our limitations going in.
And that brings us to our next slide. What are we looking at there?
Right, so if we start from the top to the bottom, just briefly, kind of big to small, I received a bunch of video files, quite a few of them. Those video files were made up of what are called GOPs, G-O-P-S. Those are groups of pictures. So they're families of images that are grouped together mathematically that construct a video. So when we look at a video, it just looks like a video. You hit play and it just runs. But in many of the videos, in fact, most of the videos we look at, there's actually groupings of frames that go together. So those groups of pictures are made up of frames. So if you were to pause a video and just look at a picture, that is a frame of video. There's a frame rate associated with videos. How many refresh pictures do we get every second? Those frames are broken down into smaller segments called pixels. Those pixels are generally little squares of information, and those pixels are finally made up of color channels, reds, greens, and blues. So video is what's called an additive process, where we take primary colors of red, green, and blue. They're mixed together to make all the colors that we see in video, secondary colors. The color channels are what we're at issue here, because those color channels allow us to perceive brightness
Hopefully
and
that
color
helps.
in an image. So that's what is of most importance to me in my analysis in this case.
In slide 14, is this an example of pixels, essentially?
That's correct. So on slide 14, I put annotations that show an exaggerated view of what we see, where the image on the left is a sample image from the closed circuit video system at 7022 Bridgman Road. I put an annotation on the left side of 240 and on the bottom 352. That's the pixel count. Vertically, this image is made up of 240 pixels tall, and horizontally 352 pixels wide. On the right side of the screen, I have shown a small portion enlarged to try to show those actual pixels, where they are actual visual little squares of information, just to orient people about the idea that we don't normally see pixels, but in the laboratory, we see them all the time.
Got it. And just because it's come up here and it's going to continue to come up, there's a giant white line across the screen there in that major picture, or that larger picture. What is that?
Yes, in this image, there is a support beam that holds up the decking structure of the second floor patio at the Lynch residence. And obviously that was right in front of the camera. We see that illuminated here because the camera itself has what's called near infrared capability. It's got illuminators or LEDs around the lens so that at night you can see in what's an otherwise dark environment. You wouldn't see much with your eyes, but the camera can see differently than your eyes can see. And so we see that reflected here, not only off the ground in the foreground, but also off of that beam.
So when we talk about pixels, the pixels, you pull out an example there. That example has no significance other than you just pulled that one out, right?
Correct.
Okay. Can you identify, or is there a process for identifying where those pixels are on a video that you're looking at?
Yes, there are. So,
and I'll move to the next slide, 15.
Yeah, so slide 15, I put a couple examples in here just to try to illustrate. I like to think of it this way: when we used to hold paper maps and you're trying to find a street or you're trying to find a city, you'd look in the alphabetical listing, where is East Washington Avenue? You find it, and it would say L6. You follow down a grid of letters, follow over a grid of numbers, kind of an XY coordinate thing, and then you find where you're looking. The same way here. So the way video is structured, the pixels always start with the location of 0. So in the upper left-hand corner in this example, that pixel in the upper left-hand corner would be X position 0, Y position 0, 0, 0. That is its location in two-dimensional space.
Got it. And so if we look at the next slide, perhaps the different corner.
Yeah, so the second example here I made in slide 16 is the opposite. The lower right-hand corner, it's at its maximum X value. It's all the way to the right. It's at its maximum Y value all the way at the bottom. So we would have an XY coordinate of 351, 239. And again, those numbers are one less than the total width and height of that image because we start counting at 0 instead of 1.
So these pixels essentially can be placed on a graph.
Absolutely.
So the question becomes then, the flickering window, what are the XY coordinates of that, correct?
That's what was of concern, yes. Where were they located?
And so when we talk about your overall question, which is which windows for flickering, this is maybe the first big question that has to be answered.
Yes.
Okay. But there were some challenges in answering that question.
Yes, there were.
All right, let's talk about those challenges. And you can start from the top and we'll go down.
Yes, so digital multimedia evidence, video, audio, still images, a term called metadata, the data that's embedded into these files, are what's of importance. And when we study digital multimedia evidence, it's often very different than the type of video you might see from a television station. I had the good fortune of working for 2 television stations prior to working here, and the goal was to make the pictures as pretty as possible. In forensic video analysis, we're often dealing with data that isn't very good. It has a lot of challenges, and in this case, the biggest challenge as I saw it was the distance from the lens. So the target, the thing we're trying to observe, wasn't up close. It wasn't like I put a camera in front of somebody or took a selfie and filled the frame with the information. In this investigation, the distance from the lens at Colin Lynch's house across the pond to the Halderson residence was 367 feet. That is quite a distance. When you couple that with a wide-angle lens, most closed-circuit television cameras have a wide-angle lens, so they can cover a wide area. You may want to cover your whole front yard or a whole area in an entryway to your business or something. The wide-angle lens makes objects appear smaller than they really are. So when you have a wide-angle lens coupled with a long distance, objects appear quite small. And if they're small, there's less detail. Video resolution. The idea with video resolution is if television pictures are rectangular. So if you think back to school, how do you get the area of a rectangle? It's width times height. That's how we calculate what's called spatial resolution of video, where we would multiply the width in pixels by the height, and that gives us our count. So if you have a camera that's rated as a 12 megapixel camera, it's really just the product of the width times the height. That's how you kind of get there. In this case, this video resolution is 352 by 240. To give you perspective, HD or high definition 1920 by 1080. So the total resolution for every frame of video here is about 4% of the area of HD. So we're not dealing with a very large data set. We have very limited data available to us. And again, the targets were small, the house windows. That's what was of interest in this investigation. The lighting conditions were a challenge here. The video in question was at night, so it's dark out. The near infrared lighting from the camera presents two different contrast ranges. So in the foreground, we have a lot of contrast. We have brights, we have darks, we have midtones. In the distance, we don't have all that contrast. It's very dark across the backyard and out onto the pond and out onto the Halderson's property. And finally, one of the biggest ones is what's called lossy, LOSSY, video data compression. Every digital video recorder that records cameras has to apply what's called lossy data compression. The idea is that when the video files are manufactured in that recorder, if they are not reduced in logical file size or how much space they take on the hard drive, the average consumer of that video would only watch the video for a very short time. It could be hours, might be a day. So lossy video compression allows the DVR to be able to store days, weeks, or months of video. And it's a destructive process. So what happens with lossy data compression is we start to lose what's called high frequency details, things that show scars, marks, tattoos, small details. Our eyes aren't as sensitive to that. So the idea with the engineering is that let's just discard that information. We can still communicate the idea and people kind of won't notice or care. The other thing that can be affected and is affected with lossy data compression is color purity. How pure are the colors? So if I've got a black shirt on, would it appear black in the video or would it be some impure color that kind of approximates black? In this case, color was not an issue because the camera was in that nighttime mode. And so the frequencies of near infrared are beyond and infrared are beyond our ability to really see with our eyes. So the camera appears to be black and white when in fact it's a color camera. So these all kind of were in my mind as challenges that would make it more difficult to try to come to an answer of where that window is located versus just looking at the video and knowing readily right away.
Despite these challenges, was it your impression that you could still march on and try to answer that overall question of which window was flickering?
It was.
And I used a process called reverse projection, correct?
Yes.
Reverse projection, a scientific process of determining the position, size, or height of an object captured in a video image, achieved by superimposing and aligning the original image over a control image with the same or identical camera in the same position. So tell us about that real quick, other than just what's on the screen. What is this?
So reverse projection has been around in the forensic community, I think since the 70s. It was originally used by traffic investigators. If a photograph was taken at a traffic crash scene, the idea was you could go back to that location, figure out where that photo was taken. Once they're what's called registered or aligned, the historic image with a new image you might take would allow you to make measurements and to place markers and to place things. So reverse projection is used as a very powerful tool in our forensic processes here at the Sheriff's Office for, again, achieving an understanding of height of a person, location of debris at a traffic crash, location of vehicles at a traffic crash, and in this case, trying to locate where the windows were located in the darkness off in the distance.
Okay,
So
we
have historic images from July 2nd. The goal then would be to take new images, superimpose them, make sure they're aligned in the X direction, left and right, the Y direction, up and down, the Z direction, in and out, depth, and then the rotationally. And we were in a good position in this case because the target hadn't moved. The Halderson residence is still in the same spot, hasn't moved. The Lynch residence hasn't moved. The camera had not moved from what we could tell. So we didn't have the amount of work we would where we say, where on earth was this picture taken? We already knew some of those variables were already controlled. And so it was just a matter of going through the work of trying to figure out, where those windows are located.
Right. So you had your images from July 2nd, and then on July 30th, you go out with a couple guys to the Lynch residence and to the Halderson residence, and you perform kind of this experiment of sorts.
Yes.
Okay. You involve Mr. Wilk, Deputy Wilk, and tell me how this process worked.
Yeah, so one of the things that I always want to do before we embark on any kind of reconstructive work at a crime scene is to try to determine, do we have variables that have changed that are going to affect the experiment? So the most obvious one to me is, do we have the same camera, the same lens, the same connectors, the same wiring, the same DVR, all of that? Because if you don't have the same recording device, you can still do the work, but I think it diminishes the strength of an opinion that can be formed from the data you collect. And so in this case, I had a couple conversations with Mr. Lynch, one I think by phone, asking him those very questions. Have you done anything to your recorder? No, I haven't done anything, he responded. I said, good, and I was seeking his consent to be able to do these experiments because we would have to gain access to his home and access to his digital video recording system in the home, as well as be in the backyard again of the Halderson residence after dark. And he said he would allow us to do that work. And so I talked to Deputy Wilk. I spoke to my supervisor, Lieutenant Carls, and said, this is what I think we should do here, is to try to get a greater understanding of where that light was coming from. I received the go-ahead from the administration of the Sheriff's Department to do this work. So on July 30th, it was a Friday evening, I met in front of the Halderson residence with Deputy Wilk and with Lieutenant Carls. I briefed them again on what I wanted them to do. And what I had done was I took a 48-inch piece of angle iron steel and I connected magnetic LED lights to it. So we had approximately 3 feet of vertical light. And in the bottom foot of that stick, kind of like a lightsaber you hold on to without having lights beneath your hands. What I told Deputy Wilk was I said, we're going to be in cell phone contact. I'm going to be over at the Lynch residence across the pond. You, Deputy Wilk, are going to be in the Halderson backyard. I said, I'm going to give you direction where I want you to stand. And when I give you the command, what I'd like you to do is take that lightsaber, that stick, and just move it slowly in front of the window of where you're standing. I don't want you to wave it wide. I don't want you to hold it up high or low. I want you to be in front of, from the camera's perspective, where the frame of the windows would be. And I said, I'll tell you when to stop, and I'll tell you when to move to the next window. So I gave him kind of an idea of what we're going to do. So once we did it, it would go quickly and efficiently, so we didn't inconvenience Mr. Lynch beyond what we needed to do.
Got it. So to recreate the experiment, you essentially had another deputy who you were on the phone with, who stood in front of the windows, moving the light around as you filmed him, presumably with the same camera from Mr. Lynch.
Yes.
But you discovered an offset, correct, in your work over at Mr. Lynch's house?
Yes, I did. So we conducted these experiments, collected the data from the DVR, and I went back to the laboratory at the sheriff's office and started examining the data. And to try to say, well, we want apples to apples comparison, we have to make sure that that's the case. Mr. Lynch told me that he had not done anything to his DVR system, but he did say to me, he said he had been doing some reconstruction work on the deck, I think replacing some deck boards or something. He said they've been doing a lot of hammering, sawing, pounding. He said there's a possibility that the camera might have moved, but he said he had not done anything to move that camera or to alter it in any way. When I was in the laboratory trying to register the images from July 2nd with the images we collected from July 30th, the Y direction, the vertical, was dead on. It was in exactly the same tilted position, up and down. The X position, however, the left and right, was off. And I saw what you see here as a sample, as an example, that the pillar was offset. When I measured how far it was offset, it was 7 pixels. And so that had to be factored into the calculations of the XY coordinates of every window that we were going to measure, that, okay, these camera is essentially in the same location. However, it had moved by the equivalent of 7 pixels on the recording.
In many ways, you're lucky that this pillar was here and that it was an immediate, obvious error that needed to be corrected in the camera.
That's correct.
And so you say, when you perform this work, you had to adjust 7 pixels to the left, and that brought you back into the original state of the Lynch video on the night of July 2nd.
Yes.
In performing this work, you did something called frame averaging. Quickly, if you could tell us what that is.
Yes, so frame averaging is what's called a noise reduction process. Whenever you record video, audio, or still images, you get what's called a signal to noise ratio. Signal is the stuff you want. Noise is the stuff you don't want. So in this case, the signal are the things in the scene we want to record. The noise is generated by the image sensor in the camera, the circuitry in the camera. Noise can be generated by the compression process in the digital video recorder. Cumulatively, all these things become visual problems for us to try to see clearly. What frame averaging does for us is, instead of just stopping the video on one frame and taking a look and making an assessment, what we do is we take subsequent frames and we mathematically average them together. So the idea is, in any sampling, if I just take one sample of a population, I can make an assessment, but that assessment may or may not be right. The reality is we would have to take more samples to know if our result is reflective of the population.
All of this to get some sort of video in.
I might be right, but the reality is I don't know. So I want to sample multiple images. In this case, I sampled over 90,000 images to make sure that we consistently saw a flickering light in the same position throughout that duration of time. What frame averaging does is it allows us to see mathematically what happened in that area during that time, because images are just numbers. So those RGB values for each pixel, if we were to average those together over time, that allows us to see what's normally there. Visually, what that does for me is it allows me to more clearly see the edges of that bright window in that dark environment.
So using frame averaging, you were able to determine what the XY coordinates of the flickering window were.
I did.
And if we're zoomed in now, obviously really close, I think everyone can see the timestamp with that white thing on the right. That's the pole that we've been looking at the whole time, but now we're zoomed in, right?
That's correct.
So at that point, you know the coordinates of this window that was flickering, and you're out there doing this experiment. You have this guy over there, this other deputy, waving the light stick around, and you're going to frame average those images
You
as well.
found a piece of
to come up
skull
with
in the
experiment image,
fireplace.
Correct.
And
And so
ashes.
then you're going to start
You
comparing and
found
contrasting. So let's start with the dining room window, the first one. So we're going to move left to right, correct?
And
correct.
ash
So dining room window on the far left.
collector thingy in
What are we looking at there?
fireplace.
We'll go through this one with some detail, and then we'll
I
move
think
to
it's safe
some of
to
these other
say.
ones. Quite similar, but what are we looking at there?
Sure. So what I've got here on slide number
You know
30
what happened?
is a frame averaged image on the left of the flickering window, the questioned
I
image
have to
from the
do
night
the
of July 2nd.
things.
Its companion to the right is Deputy Wilk in a frame averaged set of images standing in front of the dining room window to try to show the two locations of the flickering window, which is the questioned window, versus the known window, which was dining room window number 1.
Right. On the right image, this is your experiment, and you look to have essentially duct taped an iPad to that pole at this point, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that's a clock on there?
Yeah, because I didn't really know what all testing we were going to need to do. And so I took an iPad and just strapped it to the pole, make sure it was in the image, ran a stopwatch so I had a time reference that was reliable if we needed to do any timing information in the future.
Right. The time's not going to be relevant for us today, though.
No.
Okay. But if anyone's ever confused, the image with the clock on it, or that you have on that pole, that's the sample image that you took from your experiment.
That's correct.
And the other one is the actual raw footage from the night of July 2nd, or the early morning hours of July 2nd.
Yes.
What are we looking at there?
So in slide 31,
That's
these are the
a
same
little
images,
bitty
just
window.
enlarged slightly and cropped to help better focus on the area of interest, which is the two windows, the question window on the left from the night of July 2nd, or the morning of July 2nd, rather, and then on the right from our first test in front of the dining room window.
Right. So you determined then the XY coordinates of the flickering window. You already had those. And then the XY coordinates of your sample of the dining room window, correct?
Correct.
And you lay those on a graph.
Yeah, I made in slide 34 a graphic representation to help better visually show the actual locations in two-dimensional space. So video is just a two-dimensional representation of that scene. So in 2 dimensions,
Oh my
if we were to go to the
God.
next slide, the red box on the left is the location of the dining room light where Deputy Wilk stood, waved his light, like frame average through to try to see on average where the light fell. And on the right is the location of the flickering window.
And you reached a conclusion.
Right. So in the first experiment, the conclusion was that the flickering light on July 2nd was not coming from the dining room light, or the dining room window rather.
Okay. So we'll keep walking across the back side of the Halderson house. Now we're in the kitchen window 2.
Hallelujah.
You performed the same experiment with Deputy Wilk, moving the light around that night.
That's correct.
And again, we have our coordinates that are known of the flickering window, the coordinates that you obtained from your experiment, and you laid those on a graph, correct?
I did. So in slide 43, again, a representation of where those windows were, and the image or the red block on the left represents the location of that kitchen window, and the red block on the right is the location of the flickering light from the morning of July 2nd.
You reached a conclusion there.
I did. So like the first experiment, the second experiment was that the conclusion was that the flickering light was not coming from the kitchen window on July 2nd.
Keep going. Kitchen door. Now we're in the third light in from the left at the kitchen door. We have our images there, same as before, of the original image, the sample image from the test, the coordinates we've been looking at, and the coordinates you were able to obtain from your experiment.
Let me guess, it wasn't
those are
coming
graph
from
as well.
there either.
Yeah, so in slides 52 and 53, I'm showing in red the locations of where those lights were. The image on the red area on the left is actually the kitchen door light location in 2 dimensions. And on the right, the flickering light location from the early morning hours of July 2nd.
And you reached a conclusion there.
I did. The flickering light was not coming on July 2nd from the kitchen door.
Now we're onto the fireplace window, the fourth window in. Here on the left, the original frame average of the original image from the Lynch house in the early morning hours of the second. On the right, your experiment with Deputy Wilk.
Bingo.
Correct?
Correct.
There are the coordinates that you were able to obtain from the original Lynch video. And on the right, are those the coordinates that you were able to obtain from frame averaging your experiment?
They are.
Would you lay those on a graph?
I did. So in slide 61 and 62 of this presentation, it's hard to show things that are on top of one another. So what I showed in red here was the location of the flickering window from July 2nd. And on top of it with green dots, I showed the corners of where our light test showed the location of Deputy Wilk standing.
Is that perhaps a more zoomed in version of what you were trying to show there?
That's correct.
You reached a conclusion there.
Yes, so in slide 64, the conclusion was clear to me that the flickering light from July 2nd was coming from the fireplace window, the window closest to the fireplace.
Okay. And then we'll just talk quickly about the remainder, of course.
Fantastic.
You went through all of the windows on the rear side on that first level, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now talking about the family room door, same process, the original image, the image from the test. You laid the coordinates from each one, put them on a graph, and reach a conclusion that's regarding the family room door. And what was that conclusion?
I did. In slide 73, the flickering light on July 2nd was
Now
not
I think
coming
you guys
from the
can
family
see
room-
why.
from the
When I
family room
first
door.
tried to do this, I fell
TV1 6, and now we're
asleep.
the sixth window over from the left. Same process, the
I fell
original image,
asleep.
sample image, the coordinates of the pixels.
And it could not be
graph.
completed.
Yes, in slide 82, the flickering light on July 2nd was not coming from the TV window.
Now we're looking at lastly.
Yeah, we figured
this
out where it
is
came
part
from.
of
Why do you
the
have to keep
north
going
window.
through
That's
all
the
this?
farthest
Jesus
window.
Lord, have mercy.
So after calculating the uncertainty and looking into all the variables and all of your work based on your training and experience, is it your testimony that in fact fireplace window 4 was the source of the light in the early morning hours of July 2nd?
Yes, it is.
Touchdown.
I'm just going to ask to approach the judge here for 1 second.
Why do you have to get a drink of water? Why don't you just tell him to sit there? Stop that. Sorry, that was loud. It's not my fault. They did that. Baby. My poor little puppy. There's something wrong with her eyeball.
30 minutes, 4-0. We've been here an hour. If you're okay for the next 40 minutes, we'll go ahead and proceed forward. If anybody needs the break now, we'll take it. Does anybody need to break now, or can we go forward? Let's go forward. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
You're okay, sir?
I'm fine, thank you.
Go ahead.
You, I guess.
Sorry.
Right.
After essentially concluding in this case that fireplace window 4 was the source of the flickering light, you were actually asked to look at the video itself and do some work on the video to put it in a more presentable
Come here.
fashion of those early morning hours of July 2nd.
Yes.
What did you do?
So there was a lot more video.
Oh, you
that we
won't let
had
me
than what we're
wipe
going to
your
present
eye?
today. But the main focus in this part of the investigation was that flickering light. So I took the video,
Oh.
enlarged the video, and I was asked to try to speed
Figured
it up.
out
so
how
we
to
didn't
get
have
my
look at
dog
hours of
away
video,
from me.
is to try to take portions and speed it up in
Just
terms
get
of
a
frame
quick
rate.
towel,
we
wipe
don't
her
transfer it in
eye.
real time. We still see the effect of the flickering light. And at other portions to let it
She'll
run at
run
one
away.
time speed so that we could see it in real time, and then just kind of show the duration of that,
Come here.
that warning, what was seen in that window, fireplace window number 4.
Fine, whatever.
And just so everyone's on the same page, when you say you enlarge the video, are you confident that you're saying authentic to the video, or that you're not altering it in any way?
That's right. You know, and whenever I do enlargements in the laboratory, I do it in multiple fashions so that I can try to see the visual effect of different types of enlargements that can be done.
I'm showing what's been marked in this case is exhibit number 315. At least from the labels on this, does this appear to be the video presentation that you put together regarding the early morning hours of July 2nd at the Halderson home in that flickering window?
It does.
All right, I'll move 315 into evidence and ask to publish it.
Any objection? It is received. It may be published.
And while the detective is queuing that up, videos, I think 35, 40 minutes long, around there.
I think so, yes.
I'll mostly sit silent, and I understand that the video is silent, but I'll promise you the jury's already had a couple opportunities to watch long, silent videos in this case. But I may chime in at times and pause it to ask you questions about why you chose to speed up or slow down during certain portions. And in fact, when we start playing the video, we'll pause it, and I'll just have you explain what the jury's looking at briefly.
Good, I know we have a video of what we just went over. What is that? It's a window. What's happening? Still just a computer screen. You're not doing so well. Not doing so hot. Could you please? That is the Windows screen. Oh, there we go. We got it. We got it. We got it.
Maybe we should take that break up.
Should we?
On that unit either? Okay. All right. Let's take our 10, folks. Thanks.
All right, the jury.
Don't tell the judge what to do, because you can't get your shit together.
Without modifications in size.
And just switch from 9x to 1x. What does that mean?
So I was asked by Detective Sims in preparation for trial to take portions of the flickering light throughout the evening and run it faster than real time, just in the interest of the court's time, and in other sections just to run it at normal speed, 1x. So those annotations were added by me.
That's definitely flickering lights. Definitely looks like a fire. That's another light that went on. Where'd they go? Oh, there they are. Oh my gosh. Is that the fire getting that big? Surely not. Maybe. Flickering light. I mean, I guess it had to get pretty big. Could you imagine? Could you imagine doing that though? That's crazy. crazy. Like, not only did he, like, unalive them, but he who was that? But then made them not whole anymore. And put them in a fireplace. It's crazy. His parents. Parents. Yikes. Excuse you. It's rude to cough. Okay, well, we get this. We're just watching it.
The times in which that window grows brighter and then maybe other lights come on, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
What? What other words you say? Oh, he's been at it for an hour. At least. Come on, I thought you said something, bro.
The times in which that window grows brighter and then maybe other lights.
God damn it. Gosh darn it. Dag nabbit. Can't breathe out of my nose. So now I'm a mouth breather. It's unfortunate. Yeah, I'm gassy and burping. I had to just eat, so that's my excuse. That's my excuse. It's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. I know you said words. I'm not touching it again because I'll miss it and then you'll say it again and then I'll miss it again. So whatever. Say it. Don't say it. Fuck off. I'm not watching it no more.
We'll continue playing, Deputy. I'll just ask a question to put everything in context. In the next 20 minutes to a half hour or so, this video as it's sped up, there's going to be times in which that window grows brighter and then maybe other lights come on, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And that'll happen in the next 20 minutes or so of the video, but it's sped up, obviously.
I missed Jay's.
So I'll just note it around 2:59, you switched to one-time speed, correct?
That's correct.
And now some additional lights have been illuminated. I think you've identified those as kitchen window, kitchen door.
That's correct.
Some dining room one. And fair to say that just before the 3 a.m. mark, the fireplace window appeared to go dark for a second there.
It did.
Oh my god, I am so sorry. I made you sit here and watch this. This is ridiculous.
We specifically generally investigate fires and explosions.
I appreciate you speeding it up, the 4 or 5 hours there. A couple last questions. Based on your analysis, first projection, the camera and all your expert analysis in this case, are you confident that that window that we saw at around 3 in the morning that was very, very bright and then just in a kind of a snap went dark, are you confident that that is the fireplace window 4?
Yes, I am.
No further questions.
Cross-examination.
No, thank you.
May this witness be excused
You may be excused.
and released.
I'll make a decision on that maybe at the lunch break.
Thank you, Deputy. You're excused from the remainder of today, and I don't think there are any
No,
exhibits in front
you
of
don't get
for the rest of
released.
your day. Thank you. Counsel.
The state calls Special Agent Bill Boswell.
None of them get released. Y'all. None of them. What's today? Today's the 17th.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
If you believe you can safely and responsibly testify without wearing a mask, that would be our preference at this time.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. Go right ahead.
Good morning. Please state and spell your name.
It's William Boswell, William. Last name is Boswell, B-O-S as in Sam, W-E-L-L.
And what do you do for a living, sir?
I'm a special agent with the state of Wisconsin Department of Justice.
Any particular area of expertise?
Yes, within a division of criminal investigation, I'm assigned to the Arson Bureau.
What are your roles as a special agent with the Arson Bureau?
With the Arson Bureau, we specifically generally investigate fires and explosions believed to be of an intentional nature, an incendiary intentional act.
Showing it's been marked in this case, exhibit number 314. Just what is that?
That is a copy of my curricula vitae.
Move 314 into evidence.
No objection.
It is received.
Early in your career, how'd you get started in being interested in fire or anything of that sort?
Kind of a longer story, but many, many years ago was a volunteer firefighter. Began my career as a college student in biology and secondary education, and then became enrolled at Oklahoma State University's School of Fire Protection. Was hired as a fire protection consultant with Wausau Insurance Companies in 1994, and then with the Department of Justice in January of 2000 as a special agent.
And I see a badge there. Are you a law enforcement officer?
I am, sir.
And
Hi, Jason.
tell me a little bit about
November.
your training or your education in the area of investigating fires or arson.
Certainly. So initially it was with the Wisconsin Law Enforcement Academy, did my
Excuse
20 or so hours there,
me.
and then took various courses prior to that while I was employed with Wausau Insurance and while I was in college in fire investigation with the International Association of Arson Investigators, the Oklahoma chapter of the International Association of Arson Investigators, and then here in Wisconsin. In addition to that, I've taken fire academy courses in fire investigation, various courses in fire death investigation, and I currently teach for the Wisconsin Department of Justice Death Investigation School. I teach fire death investigation and body recovery.
Tell us about the subspecialty of fire death investigations.
So with fire death investigation, my background there is assessing fire scenes. We generally look at fire patterns on walls and on floors and ceilings and things of that nature. When we're dealing with a fire death related event, we're looking for those same types of patterns and making various assessments about the things that we see with bodies. Sometimes it's a complete intact body. Sometimes it's a body that's been disarticulated as a result of fire or fire suppression operations.
So
What is
what
under the
effect does
chair?
fire have on the human body?
Cat is up
It
there.
can
So what
change
are
it
you
dramatically.
looking at?
Heat, when heat is applied to a body, heat will generally cause the skin to tighten and shrink. Wrinkles around the corners of the eyes and the corner of the mouth begin to smooth out somewhat with just the application of heat. But as the body continues to heat within a compartment or a bedroom or wherever it might be, those changes eventually will get down to the destruction of the skin, the fat, the muscle tissue, and can ultimately, if the fire is allowed to continue to burn, down to the destruction of the bone tissue as well.
You talk a little bit about your experience, your education, and maybe your teaching. As well as teaching, are you one of the people who actually responds to crime scenes?
Yes, sir.
What type of crime scenes are you responding to regularly?
They vary. In addition to the fire-related events that I get called to as an employee of the Department of Justice, my coworkers in the Arson Bureau generally get called out to work officer-involved shootings, homicides that our special assignments folks investigate, and we assist in processing those scenes, sometimes with and sometimes without the assistance of the State Crime Laboratory.
Do you have any estimate as to how many fire scenes you've investigated in your role in the Department of Justice?
Since January of 2000, if I estimated about 25 per year, over 400 or more as a case agent and additional as an assisting agent with one of the other folks in the Arson Bureau.
And as part of that experience, if you unfortunately had to see the human body in various states of being burned on different occasions?
Yes, sir.
Sometimes partially and sometimes more completely.
That's correct.
Talk to us generally about fire. What temperature does fire generally burn at? What can you tell us about fire?
Most any fire that you experience generally does not burn beyond about a temperature of around 1800 degrees.
Is 1800 degrees what generally fire burns at? Is that sufficient to incinerate completely the human body into ash?
It generally would not.
Tell me about that.
Generally, you end up needing some additional, if I can use the word assistance, to result in the destruction of human tissue. Even devices that are designed in crematoriums to completely destroy a body often will leave various small fragments of bone, not very often tissue, but small fragments of bone that are left over after that cremation event. So short of adding additional oxygen or maybe changing the fuel to oxygen ratio and how the fire burns, it's very, very difficult to get a complete consumption of human body just from the fire.
When you say insert oxygen, would a small household fan, I suppose there's one sitting right there, something of that size be enough to do what you just mentioned in terms of inserting oxygen if that were applied to perhaps a residential fire?
It would certainly help. I mean, if by example, if you're lighting a small campfire or something of that nature, or lighting a fire in your own fireplace, you may often blow on that or or you use a set of bellows or maybe wave your hand to add and move additional air or oxygen across the surface of that fire to increase the effectiveness of that fire.
Sure. In crime scenes you've responded to and in your training and experience where the human body has been burned, are there usually some remains left that you're able to identify or find?
Generally, yes.
And in perhaps the more extreme of those states, what are those remains? What's usually left?
You'll find very small pieces of bone fragment, the more thick or dense pieces of the human skeleton, perhaps kneecaps, the ball joints of hips and shoulders, where the bone is more densely compacted because of just its development. Teeth will oftentimes remain, thicker portions, maybe around the orbits of the eye, maybe portions of the base of the skull.
Are you assisted in your work with the Department of Justice with professionals in other disciplines?
Yes, sir.
And just in general, what professions do you generally work with?
We work with medical examiners, forensic pathologists, and forensic anthropologists on a fairly regular basis when we're dealing with burned and scattered or disarticulated human remains.
In the early part of July or going into mid-July of 2021, were you asked to assist in the investigation of a homicide to Krista Halderson out in Windsor?
Yes, I was.
And
Dane County Deputy Greg Leatherberry had contacted another one of my coworkers, U.S. Department of Justice, Special Agent William Fulton, to assist in coming to look at the residence in Windsor. And specifically at that time, it was directed toward looking at a fireplace that was inside the residence. After they had assessed it, I was on vacation back in Pennsylvania at the time. I was contacted and asked if upon my return to Wisconsin, if I could stop by and also take a look at and assess the fireplace inside the residence.
And did you stop by?
I did, sir.
And did you have an opportunity to thoroughly examine the fireplace, the logs, the newspaper, the ashes, and things of that sort at that fireplace at the Halderson home?
Yes, sir.
And were you aware that photographs were being taken throughout these processes of examining the fireplace and searching the home?
Yes, I was.
I'm showing it's been marked in this case as exhibit number 316, all the way through 340. Can you just page through those? And the question at the end is, do these appear to be photographs of the Halderson fireplace home in areas that were searched by you and others in law enforcement over the course of days you were there? Are
Yes.
those photographs itself?
Yes, those are.
Okay, I'll take those back from you. I'll move 316 all the way through 340 in evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
They are received.
316.
And especially, there's a screen in front of you that's going to come on, but Judge, I'll ask to publish those via slideshow on US or the HDMI lab.
Sorry if what I'm doing is bothering anybody with the noise.
And Agent, what are we looking at there in Exhibit 228?
This is the fireplace that I was asked to come and examine.
Just based on this overall photograph, are there any observations you're able to make based on your training and experience in this area?
In looking at the fireplace insert or the wrap that's around the fireplace, there is an area at the top that is a different color. Appears as if the paint is missing in that area, and that's perhaps bare metal beneath. And it appears as if of the what should be 4 glass inserts in the fireplace, only 3 remain.
We'll go to the next photograph.
Let's.
What are we looking at there?
This appears to be the base of the fireplace or the hearth area with the fireplace insert
Never knew that was
at
called
the
a
base of the
hearth.
fireplace at the top of the
I
photograph.
would
There
have
are
just
also
continued to call
what
it a
appear to be
mantle.
3 evidence markers placed on the hearth as well.
Around the time that you were there and at other times you were where Deputy Leatherberry was taking swabs and things of that sort around the fireplace.
Leatherberry.
That's correct.
Okay, we'll go to the next slide. What are we looking at there?
That appears to be a pair of gloves.
All right, and that's exhibit 229. I'll say it's exhibit 229.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
We'll go to the next one.
Okay.
Tell us about that view.
That again is the front or the facing side of the fireplace with the 3 of 4 panels of glass still in place. It appears in this photograph, you can still see portions of the glass at both the top and the bottom of the door frame on the left-hand side.
Go to the next slide, 231. Is that a closer up view of that area that you were saying you could see the bare metal?
That is correct.
What does this appear to be to you based on your training and experience? What were you observing there?
In looking at this photograph, there are a couple of things. One, if we look toward the middle portion of the photograph on the stone, there is some soot deposition or discoloration to the stone, which would not be uncommon in the area of a wood-burning fireplace inside a home. Beneath that is the insert for the fireplace, and toward the, if you were looking at the top edge, toward the left and the right-hand side, there appears to be a bubbling or some type of change in the texture of the paint on both sides, and in the middle portion, the paint appears to be absent down to the level of the bare metal.
Okay, we'll go to the next slide. 232. What did 232 appear to be to you?
232 appears to be the far right-hand pane of the glass doors to the fireplace.
We'll go to the next slide. 233. Is it a closer up of that glass area that you said was broken off?
That's correct, down toward the bottom left door, yes.
We'll go to the next slide, which is 234. And is that door open?
That's correct.
We'll go to the next slide. 235. At some point, you opened up the fireplace, correct?
That's correct.
What types of observations did you personally make based on your training experience once you were able to open up the fireplace and look inside?
Certainly, just a couple of items in looking around. If we've moved beyond the observations of the fireplace insert with the discoloration and the change in texture of the paint, as we look inside the fireplace, there are a few areas of discoloration on both the left and right hand sides of stonework inside the fireplace. There is a discoloration or a change in coloration, if you will, on the fire gray from left to right. And as we got in a little bit further and began to examine things a little more closely, there was almost like a greasy residue on the pull chain on the right-hand side, which controls the fireplace damper at the top of the chimney.
In your profession, why was discoloration noticeable, or why did you even note it in any of your reports?
Certainly, there is, when we look at fire scenes in general, we're looking for changes in things from in patterns. If we're looking at the overall, a particular piece of fuel, let's say, like a couch, we're looking at differences across the surfaces of that couch. Considering it's the same piece of fuel from left to right, top to bottom, we're looking at how it burns differently and what it may do differently in the environment. In looking at this photograph of the fireplace grate in particular, we noticed the color change and gradation between left and right. To me, that indicated that something on toward the right-hand side of the fireplace burned differently, was perhaps a different fuel than what was on the opposing side.
All right, we'll go to the next slide. 236, just a view of that glass again.
That's correct.
All right, next slide, 237. What are we looking at there, and why was that notable?
At the bottom of the fireplace, or the fireplace floor, and what you would find in most solid fuel burning fireplaces or furnaces, you would find a trap door, if you will, or an ash dump door. It's a flat metal door that rotates on a central pin left or right, and in a fireplace that burns wood, to get rid of the ash, you would, to keep your fireplace clean, you would open that up, sweep the ash down in, and it would go into some type of container or area where the ash would be secured until you cleaned it out.
Is this a common feature in homes?
Yes.
Yes.
Wood burning fireplaces, yes.
And the area in which this goes into, is that generally a fire-resistant area?
Generally, it could go into an ash bucket. I can tell you from personal experience growing up, it went to another unused fireplace in the basement of my parents' home. And it just went to the floor in the basement, and there was nothing there to catch it. In some locations, it's an enclosed environment. In other locations, it might go into a metal ash bin or bucket where the ash would be collected and removed.
In the times that it's an enclosed environment, and there's the bucket or another fireplace below it,
I don't have one.
is there usually an access door to allow the homeowner or whoever's keeping the fire to be able to clean that out periodically?
Yes, there should be.
We'll go to the next slide. 238. What are we looking at there, and why was that notable?
This is the right side, lower right-hand side of the fireplace. And again, I believe when Detective Leatherberry took this photograph, it was to document that discoloration of the tines, if you will, on the fireplace grate, as well as the presence of the greasier substance that's on the handle for the pull chain on the right-hand side.
And this may be
Do you know what that greasier substance is?
Some of these photographs are being taken by others, but were you personally involved in being very close to this area and this fireplace?
Yes, I was.
Was there any sort of sense that made any that gave you any impression or that raised your attention at all?
Yes, there was.
And tell me about that.
When I'll talk about my example first, because it'll be somewhat maybe gruesome toward the end. When in the performance of my normal duties, if we are out conducting a fire death investigation and we're looking to recover human remains inside a structure that may be buried beneath debris, that may be in collapse, whatever it might be, we rely very much on our senses sometimes to get us there. Sometimes it's a sense of sight. Sometimes it is feel. You can sometimes walk over top of human remains that are beneath ash and not know it until you feel a difference in what you're standing on. And sometimes it is smell. And I equate that smell very often because I love the barbecue. It smells like barbecued pork oftentimes, or the grease that you would get from barbecuing a pork shoulder. And this is the smell that I associated with what I was gathering from inside that fireplace when I was down in front of it working near it.
We'll go to the
That's
next slide.
crazy.
Now we're back up on the actual frame itself, but I think it's a closer view in Exhibit 241. Can you tell us why this photograph's relevant and what you're able to glean from that bubbling that we see there?
Certainly. This appears to me to be, if we look at the doors and
Love
break
the
the seam of the
barbecue.
doors, this is probably where the two doors come together in the
Bit
middle of the fireplace.
strange.
And what you're seeing on the metallic surface above of the insert is a bubbling or a change in the texture of the paint that is applied, presumably from the manufacturer, but the paint that's applied around the frame of the fireplace.
And based on your training experience, what do you have
barbecue.
any comments as to what might cause such bubbling?
Certainly, around the fireplace, the assessment that I think most people would make if they looked at it was that it must have been impacted thermally by some type of heat leaving the fireplace and impacting the metal. Could that also be caused by some type of chemical contact? Absolutely.
So would you
Go
say
to the next one.
that the
242.
human
Now this is the other side of perhaps that area on the top of the frame.
people,
what difference
human
are you
meat
able to
tastes
glean from this
like
picture? It's labeled as 242, but also with Mr. Leatherberry's sticker as family L.
Certainly. As we are on the left side of the photo, the
If
far
I
left
had
side
to
of the photo where the
guess, I
two
would
corners of the
say
insert
that
come together,
if
there
there's
is
anything that we taste
no,
most
at least in this
like, I would
photograph, no
bet
visible
pig.
damage or changes in the surface of the,
Because
of the
think
paint
about
around
it.
the insert. But as we move to
If there's
the
any
right,
animal we're most
you're
like.
right also, we start to see that the texture of the paint changes and the amount of the paint present continues to change until we're at the far right-hand side of the photograph where we're down to the bare metallic surface of the frame insert.
And same question here. Do you believe this either could have been affected by heat or some sort of chemical agent?
I would believe that this would be a heat or a thermal related artifact.
Go to the next slide, which is Exhibit 316. At some point, that fireplace grate was removed out,
That's correct.
and you examined it thoroughly, I would imagine.
Yes,
Okay. Is this that grate?
that is the grate.
That newspaper that we see crumpled up in there, was
Get
it important to you
DNA
to
off
maybe
of
look into the date on that newspaper and what type of newspaper it was?
Yes, we did. We examined each of the pieces of each of the items that were on the grate as we went from top to bottom and got down to where the newspaper was.
And you wrote a report in this matter documenting the type of newspaper, where it was addressed to, the date and all of that.
That's correct.
And if you need to see that report, you let me know and I'll just bring it to you. But did you recall the date that newspaper was from?
Well, I don't want to speculate, but late June of 2021, maybe the 23rd, maybe the 27th.
Sure. And if I showed you your report, you'd be able to confirm that?
Absolutely, I would.
All right.
Oh my God,
Showing your
I'm
report in
so
this
sorry.
matter, and my thumb is right next to it. Were you right on the 23rd?
I was right on the 23rd.
All right. And what was that addressed to?
It was listed as current resident 4595 Oak Spring Circle, DeForest, Wisconsin, 53522-1743.
And what newspaper was it?
This was the Badgerland Values Dane Zone newspaper.
And that's one of those things they just send to your house. You don't really want them, but they send them to you anyway?
That's correct.
We'll go to the next one. 317, is that an overhead view?
Yes, it is.
There's a white area in the middle of that fence log. Did that at all catch your attention?
Yes, it did.
What?
When we, for orientation purposes, I guess for the jury, when you're looking at this photograph, the top left-hand portion of the photograph with the darker tines, as you're facing the fireplace, that would be on your right-hand side. So the back of that fireplace grate is at the bottom of the screen for orientation purposes. But in looking at the burned piece of wood in the center,
I'm not good at
the white
orientating.
item that is present there
You
at
say
about
to
the
the
6 o'clock
right.
position, before we moved this out of the fireplace, we took a look at it with some better lighting, and based on my training experience, that appeared to be bone, burned bone.
And was that in fact there? You did not place that there, I guess.
That is correct. I did not place that there.
And we'll go to the next slide, which I believe is a close-up 318, but that is a photograph prior to anything
Oh, no.
disturbed in that area.
That's correct.
We'll go to 319, which is next. That's what the fireplace looks like without the grate,
That is correct.
and we're able to see a more clear view of the ash trap there.
Yes.
I don't know where everyone's at with fireplaces in their house. A lot of people have the gas one. Could you just explain what that chain does in relation to a fire?
Certainly.
Opens
So
up
the
flue,
chain it
damper,
controls a
whatever.
damper that is on top of the chimney. If you were to go on top of the roof of the residence to where the chimney is, there is a metal plate that is able to be moved up and down by pulling on this chain either down or releasing it up to assist in airflow throughout the chimney, as is the circular item that you see in the back. That is for combustion air or fresh air to come into the back of the fire at the base of the fire from the exterior, and the heat rises and goes out and leaves the structure. So if that chain were pulled completely down, it would close a damper at the top of the fireplace.
Understood. All right, we'll go to the next exhibit, 320, and just a closer view of maybe that ash trap. We'll go to the next one, 321.
Ash
Again,
trap.
that became relevant in your investigation, did it not?
That's correct.
And that's perhaps why there's quite a few photos. And we'll go through a few of these somewhat quickly, but we'll go to the next one. There, we're looking at just another view of that top view of the fire.
That's correct.
Goes without saying, but fair to say that that fire appears to have some fresh logs put on top of it,
Yes,
and one burnt piece in the middle.
that's correct.
All right, we'll go to the next one.
Council, we should note for the record what the exhibit numbers are.
Sure. That was 322. Now we're at 323.
Yeah, council.
What are you doing here and taking some of the, or having some of these photographs taken? Do you know the purpose?
Yes, I believe when we took this was it was twofold. One, to continue to show the pieces or the items that were on the grate that were unburned, to include the two logs on both the left and the right side, as well as the newspaper. And in the bottom center, running parallel with the fireplace grate, was another piece of wood that ultimately was squared off on one end and kind of rounded over on the end closest to the
Squared off
viewer.
with what?
We'll go to the next one, which is 324. We're gonna have a couple close-up photographs of this suspected bone, correct?
Yes,
And this was the bone that you observed on the top of the fireplace?
that's
Fire.
correct. Yes,
All right, we'll go to the next one, 325, just some different lighting.
yes,
Go to the next one, 326, and at some point it was placed on a kind of a measuring tool from law enforcement.
yes,
And the same with 327.
correct.
At points during your investigation, did it appear necessary to you to call out a forensic anthropologist who specialized in bone,
Absolutely.
and was one brought to the scene?
Oh, it looks like a bone.
Yes.
And who was that?
Dr. Christina Figueroa Soto with the Dane County Medical Examiner's Office.
We'll go to the next one,
Figueroa
328.
Soto.
What is this?
Those are additional, what appeared to be bone fragments that were around the area where the larger piece was that you saw in the prior exhibit.
329. Just another one of those fragments.
That's correct.
And the next couple, go to 330. There was just some zoomed in images of that grate where some of these things were being found. So,
That's correct.
all right. Same with 331,
Yes,
332,
yes,
and 333. 333, though, brings us to a different spot in the Halderson home, does it not?
that's correct.
And in fact, we'll go to 334. We have to go to the basement, right?
Yes, the prior photo was the ash dump removed so we could see what was underneath it and what was beneath it.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Sure.
Why? Sorry. Not my fault. I didn't do that. See, defense is so lazy. Like, only one gets up and goes. Like, don't you want to be involved? And he doesn't even do nothing. He just sits there. He doesn't say nothing. He doesn't do nothing. He doesn't move. I don't have shit to say. Like, bro.
Ash trap. Fireplace. Where, in fact, did that ash trap lead to in the Halderson home?
It led to an area directly beneath the fireplace. This was a tri-level home. The basement level is below grade. The area where the fireplace was located that you saw in the prior photos was at grade level. There was a kitchen, living room, dining room space, and then a bedroom space. So we're in this photograph, we were at the lowest level of the home, looking at what would have been the back side of the fireplace. And I had mentioned on one of the prior exhibits, the combustion intake, the circular item in the back of the fireplace. The metallic pipe that you see here is what goes directly to the back side of that combustion air intake for the fireplace.
Was there an access in the Halderson home to the container containing the ashes from the ash trap?
Yes, there was.
And was it easily accessible?
No, it was not.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, dear.
What you see here is after some of the items had already been moved, but so in the basement, the blue table that you see here was covered in other items. I believe I referred to it in my report. There were pieces and parts of what appeared to be an old billiard table that had been stacked up upon the top surface and leaning up against the front of this blue workbench, if you will. The workbench and all the items associated with the billiard table had to be removed, and we then removed the wood paneling that you see on the wall to get to where the ash trap is. And if you look at the bottom right-hand portion of the photo, underneath the table, you'll see a gray colored item there. Immediately to the left of that debris that you see on the floor is debris that has fallen out
Wipe
of
your eyes again.
the door that covered up the ash trap access to the fireplace.
So what did you do to gain access to this area of the house?
All the items were removed from the workbench. The workbench was removed, and we removed the paneling from the wall. Saw that we had a very, very small opening for access to the ash trap. And knowing that we had to get in here to see what was beneath that fireplace, my coworker, Wim Fulton from Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, had contacted a colleague of his who specializes in urban search and rescue, shoring up buildings, breaching walls, and things like that to find out what was going to be the safest way to access this for our safety and to prevent any collapse inside the residence.
And we'll go to the next slide. So what did you do here?
So so for reference, the smallest opening that you see there on the right-hand side where the wall is painted yellow, that was where the ash trap door had been. And it was a very, very small, approximately 8x8 opening that we needed. That's all we had initially to try to get inside of where this was. So the larger openings that you see to the left and the right were openings made in the wall by Special Agent Fulton based on the recommendation from his urban search and rescue coworker.
We'll go to the next slide.
So,
Just a closer up of what is that?
bet you.
That is the opening to the left-hand side that we created in the wall with the sledgehammer to be able to access the interior portion that was beneath the fireplace.
And we'll go to the next slide. Closer up, what is that?
That is a similar opening, but now on the right-hand side of the fireplace.
At that point, after cutting these holes, were you able to access the ash area?
Yes.
And we'll go to the next slide. What is that?
And what did you
That
find
is
in
a
there?
top-down view from the vantage point of the level just above the basement, looking down through the ash trap into the pit that contained the ashes underneath the fireplace.
All right. And we'll go to the next slide. What is that?
That is a similar view of that area and the ash that was inside the ash pit, if you will, beneath the fireplace.
And the next slide. Similar?
Similar, yes, with debris removed.
All right. And the next slide. What are we looking at there?
Same area, a different capture of the area after additional debris was removed from inside.
Okay. We're going to stop looking at photographs for a second. You mentioned debris
What is
removed.
that?
So I guess I assume you're removing debris and taking photos along the way.
That's correct.
Tell me about that process.
So
It's just like a
I'll
little
talk about the
crawl
photos
space.
first. With the assistance of Dane
This
County
house is
Deputy
just
Scott Coons,
full of surprises.
we attached cameras to the underside of the fireplace. The support floor for the fireplace had iron or steel bars running through it for support. We used magnetic cameras to hold, or magnets to hold the cameras up so that we could view the interior of this to do two things: to A, take photographs along the way, and B, to push those images to his iPad that he had, so that in areas, I mean, these holes are about 16 by 16 inches. And I'm a little barrel chested, and getting inside was a little difficult. So sometimes we had to rely on what he was transmitting to his iPad so that we could see where we were to gather items. So we had lights that he set up inside, as well as his cameras that assisted us in documenting the process as we removed debris from the upper levels down to the level that you see here.
And just in general, how did you remove the debris?
So we worked in at different times from each side, but never usually at the same time. We had a fan that was set up on top of the chimney. We removed the damper from the top of the chimney outside and had a fan to draw out dust, to keep dust from getting inside the residence. And we used large grain scoops, plastic hand grain scoops, and removed the items that removed the piles of debris in there to 5-gallon pails, and had those then removed to the exterior of the structure for further examination by Dr. Figueroa Soto and others, as well as the Dane County Bomb Squad with their X-ray machine.
And how long did this whole process take to take out all this ash?
We worked that day for probably 6 hours or so. By the time we got started, we had breached the wall prior to that, and we had several different crews there, sifting crews working outside, as well as the crime lab and the Dane County Bomb Squad. And it was the better portion of the day. We actually, 3 or 4 of us actually ended up having to leave at the end of the day to go to a different fire someplace else, but we finished this up before we took off that day.
And were you part of the sifting operation after the debris was removed?
A portion of it, yes.
And were things of note being found?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So the sifting operation consisted of a couple of different things. Again, when materials we brought out before they went to the sifting stations, and we probably had 4 to 6 sifting stations, maybe more. Before those items were sifted, they were X-rayed by the bomb squad, bomb techs, to determine if there were any items in a particular bucket that might be of interest and that somebody should be looking for. Whether it was metallic items, whether they believed it was something that showed up that maybe looked different that you might not see right away with the naked eye. And then those items were sifted. As the items were sifted, if there were questions about what it might be, whether it was bone or whether it was maybe non-organic remains, Dr. Figueroa Soto was there to answer those questions for the sifting crews. And then as we went through 1/2-inch and 1/4-inch screens, the items that were sifted out onto tarps in case we needed to go back through those at a later date, and those items were maintained.
Did you yourself see any items that appeared to be bone to you?
Yes, I did.
And were those items also examined by Dr. Figueroa Soto from the crime lab, or from the medical examiner's office?
Yes. Yes, they were.
Those items that you observed that appear to be bone, as well as the items that you observed in the fireplace that you've already said you believe to be bone, were those consistent with what you've observed in your career and your training and experience as bone or human bone that's subjected to heat or fire?
I could say that they were consistent with bone. I would not be able to make a determination while there if it was human bone or non-human bone.
Do you rely on another expert to make that
I do
determination?
indeed.
And
Yes.
who's that expert?
That would be a forensic anthropologist, and in this case, Dr. Figueroa Soto.
And she was in fact on scene, was she not?
She was.
1 second.
You bet.
No further questions. Thank you.
Cross-examination?
No, thank you.
May this witness be excused
He may be excused.
Nope.
and released, or
Oh.
you'll let him know?
We'll let him know.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good remainder of your day.
You do
Thank
the same. Thank you.
Let me inquire, counsel, of the timing here, if you can.
Sure.
Come on up.
Oh my God. How much longer? And this one, how long is this later? We'll stop after this lady. We'll end this one after this lady. Just sit there.
We need to break both for convenience of witnesses so that we don't get started with someone and have to stop, and for my schedule with another hearing. What I'd like to do is go back onto the record at 12:45, so that there's an hour and 15 minutes here where you are free.
And at that time, did you collect? And at that time, did you?
Who this lady? Dog cat. Stop that. Stop it.
Please be seated, everybody.
That's probably why your eye is like that. He probably messed you up.
Folks, during the lunch break, was anyone exposed to any information or participate in any discussions about the case or seek out or purposely or inadvertently become exposed to any information? I see no hands. Thank you very much. We are in a moment ready to proceed. We're just organizing exhibits slightly. And then the state will call its next witness.
Drop it.
State's gonna call Lissa Kiefer to the stand.
Oh my God.
Good afternoon. If you feel you can safely and
Hey.
responsibly testify without a mask, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Go right ahead.
Good afternoon. Could you please state your first and last name for the record and spell both?
Lissa Kiefer, Lissakiefer.
How are you employed, Lissa?
I'm the store manager for Quick Trip in Windsor, Wisconsin.
Quick Trip.
And were you working in that capacity in
Quick
July
Trip
of
today.
2021?
Yes,
And at that time, did you collect some
Sure
video
did.
and turn it over to police of some store footage from your store on July 1st of 2021?
yes,
Maybe.
And was
What's it to
that
you?
video footage that you turned over true and accurate?
yes,
Nope.
I would move exhibit to do 405 into evidence at this time.
no objection.
It is received.
And permission to publish?
Yes.
We would ask for the HDMI. And this is the Quick Trip you said in Windsor, Wisconsin?
Correct.
And that's by DeForest.
Yes,
Hold on, it's going really fast.
Pop 12.
And just for the record, we are
11.
playing, there's several cameras, correct?
yes.
We're playing, this is camera 15.
Jesus.
Be sure to note the start time for the video once you begin. If this
We're
isn't-
starting it at 8:22 p.m.
Thank you.
And this is one of those cameras that kind of pivots, so it takes different pictures of different locations every few seconds. Is that fair?
Yes, yep.
Just gonna note the time is 8:22 and 48 seconds in the PM. Camera 23. Now we're gonna look at camera 23. What area of your store is camera 23?
It is the aisle that carries the ATMs.
Also looks to be like the cooler air, kind of.
Cooler
back to
ice, and it's the
area.
path to the beer cave, yes.
Okay,
And the time on this image?
I think we're getting it before we
Okay.
start playing.
I can't read this, the small print. So I don't know if
Absolutely.
it's there or not.
8:23 PM.
Thank you.
Man, stop breathing into the camera. The camera, the microphone.
And we're stopping it at 8:23 and 30 seconds. And then finally, I believe we are going to play camera 10. Starting it at 8:24 and 14 seconds. and stopping it at, well, it just flipped, but I believe we stopped it at 8:25. Oh,
Did we?
and we're done with that HDMI.
What did we watch? I didn't see nothing.
And that was all video footage from your store in Windsor.
Correct.
I'm not going to show you what has been marked as exhibit.
I mean, I wasn't watching, so I don't really know.
Could you please identify what exhibit 406 is?
It's a receipt from my store.
I would this time move exhibit 406 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
Thank you.
And that was for a purchase of 2 10-pound bags of ice.
Correct.
And the time
Oh.
of that purchase
Sorry.
is
I'm not paying
8:24
attention,
p.m.
y'all. I
Correct.
apologize.
No further actions.
Cross-examination.
None, thank you.
Thank you. May this witness be excused and released?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.
Pay more attention than the defenses, I would say.
Negastini.
Negastini. Oh, I was supposed to stop at her. Oh, well. I'll keep going.
Good afternoon. If you're able to safely and responsibly testify without your mask, that would be our preference. If you could. Thank you so much. Go right ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. Please state and spell out your name for everyone typing notes here.
It's Vincent D'Agostini, Vincent, D'', capital A, Gostini.
And how are you employed, sir?
How am I employed?
Yeah.
Currently, I actually just accepted a job at Target, but I was previously employed with Fleet Farm.
In what role?
Loss prevention team lead.
Sure. And was that back in July of 2021?
Yes, it was.
Tell me about what your job was in general back in July of 2021 at Fleet Farm.
Basically, my job is to deter theft and to operate the CCTV surveillance system. And then also I played a role in inventory procedures as well.
In part of that role, did you sometimes have the opportunity to work with the police and as they were investigating things?
Yes, very frequently.
Could you describe, just in case everyone doesn't know, where is the Fleet Farm that we're talking about?
It's a 4630 Dalmore Road in DeForest. It's right on the corner of I-19 and Highway 90.
And at some point, were you asked to provide police some surveillance footage from inside the Fleet Farm and maybe even a little bit outside, but mostly inside on July 2nd in kind of early in the morning, around 7:20 or so?
Yes, it was.
And did you provide the police a copy of that video ultimately?
I did.
All right, and I'll note for counsel, it's marked as 407 and I'd move 407 into evidence.
No objection.
It is received.
All right, and we'll go ahead and publish that.
And it should appear on the computer monitor in front of you once it is played.
Go ahead. So we're playing clip 42. What are we looking at there, by the way?
This is our front entrance to the store.
We'll go to the next clip. We're going to play clip 5-1. What are we looking at in clip 5-1?
This is our last aisle in the hardware department. And it's right next to the farm department where we keep tarps and some outdoor gear.
And I'll just draw the jury's attention to maybe that center row, someone about to cross or walk into that aisle. Whereabouts is that person at the top of the screen in the center?
That aisle is where the tarps are located.
All right, and we'll go to the next clip. And we'll play clip 56. What are we looking at there?
This is again up at the front entrance, and that would be lane 1 is the closest checkout lane there.
And do you recognize that item that the person in that video is purchasing?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
It's a black and silver tarp.
Oh, well, goddamn. The same tarp they found with all the blood on it. Jesus Christ.
I'm going to show you a couple photographs here. I'll start with the question. In addition to this video, did the police ask you to maybe look into that actual purchase itself?
Yes.
And were you able to do that in your role?
Yes, I was.
What's exhibit number 408? What does that look like to you?
This is a transaction snapshot for that transaction, or essentially a receipt for it.
And are you able to tell what the subject in that transaction purchased?
Yes, it is. It's a 6x8 silver black heavy duty poly tarp.
And is there a date and time that this was all done at?
Yes, July 2nd, 2021 at 7:21 a.m.
I'll move 408 to evidence.
No objection.
It is received.
What is 409? Do you recognize that at all?
Yes, this is kind of a close-up of the card information that was used to purchase that tarp.
Okay. And does it have the same date and time stamp for the silver black heavy duty poly tarp?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Now I'll move 409 into
Pretty
evidence.
sure it says.
It is received.
And you've mentioned that tarp are 410 and 411. Are those photographs of maybe the packaging of the tarp and maybe what would be inside?
Yes.
All right, I'll move 410 and 411.
And
No objection.
they are received.
All right, I'll ask the publishees on the envelope. So what's going to happen is that screen's going to come on in 1 second. We're going to show you the same pictures again. So we're looking at 408. And if we zoom in there at the top, there's the date that you were referencing, correct? The July 2nd at 7:21 a.m.
Correct.
And a bit farther down, there's the item description of a 6x8 silver black heavy duty poly tarp, quantity 1, purchased for $6.99.
Yes.
Excellent. That's the same information on exhibit 409.
Yes, it is.
I'm covering up the remainder of the exhibit, perhaps that has some information on it that we don't need to share. And then zooming out, just briefly, you testified that 410, that's the packaging of that tarp that was purchased,
Yes, it is.
and 411, the tarp.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Good luck in your new role.
Thank you.
Cross-examination.
Thank you. Now, sir, as part of your investigation into this, you were asked to see if that card had been used for any previous transactions, correct?
Correct.
And you were only able to locate one previous transaction, correct?
That's correct.
And that was from back in September of 2020, correct?
Correct.
That's all. Thank you.
Any redirect. And just to note, for the record, the video clips were played in their entirety.
They were all played in their entirety.
Very good. Thank you, sir. You are excused from your subpoena, and I suspect released. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Oh my God, they released somebody. Holy shit.
State will now call Dr. Breslauer to the stand.
Oh my God. Okay. Hold on. Yeah. We'll just. We're going to cut this short because this one is long. And, well, I don't want to make a 5-hour video because it's too long. It's too long for me. And I need a little break ski. Okay? You know, my kids keep coming in and doing things. So, I don't really know what this was all about. We saw a fireplace. He burned them. We got some evidence of that, okay? Put them there. Burned them. Got it. Bought the tarp. Got him on camera. Buying a tarp. What else? Got him on camera with the fire going. Got the bones in the ash pit. I like that word, ash pit. Sounds like ass pit, but it's Ash Pit. Cat's name is Ash. Anyway, what else? Went to the Quick Trip, bought some ice, put them in the freezer, put the rest of the body parts. Why didn't you just burn them all? I guess you got tired of burning them? I don't know. What's the point? That's crazy. Like, what is your thinking? Like, what is the thought process? Like, you burn some of it, but not all of it. Like, could you not fit? Like, Dad's torso, I guess, didn't fit in there. And that's why maybe he didn't burn that. Maybe. I don't know. Do the Jeffrey Dahmer thing. Put them in a bucket and dissolve them. Something. I don't know. Who knows? But anyway. Okay. We're going to stop this one here and then we're going to start another one. Another one. Okay. Join me on the next one. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all of those things. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. See ya on the next one. Wait. We're not.